The anime begins with a young man named Nick, who belongs to a martial party in the Labyrinth City. The place is teeming with monsters, and it's up to Nick and his comrades to protect the city and its inhabitants from harm. So Nick loves his job, but one day, his party leader, Argus, kicks him out of the group for reasons that Nick can't fathom. To make matters worse, Nick's girlfriend abandons him too. Feeling lost and alone, Nick is approached by a girl who claims to be a famous idol. She hands him a concert ticket and invites him to come see her perform. However, Nick is hesitant at first, but he decides to go, and he's blown away by the girl's talent. Her name is Agate, and he can't get her out of his head. Sadly, attending the concert isn't cheap, and Nick needs money. He heads to the Adventurers Guild to find new party members, but he's haunted by Argus's words, telling him that he's not cut out for the job anymore. While eating and pondering his fate, Nick is joined by three strangers. There's an assassin girl, an exiled priest, and a dragon man. At that time, he tries to guess their stories while sipping his drink, but he can't seem to figure them out. Then he raises his glass to his ex and his new companions, feeling a sense of camaraderie despite their differences. They'd all share a common experience of betrayal, and it's clear that trust is hard to come by. Just when things are starting to feel comfortable, the assassin girl drops a bombshell. She's not who she seems because she's actually a witch named Tiana. Knowing that, Nick is shocked but also intrigued. Soon after, as Tiana shares her story, Nick can't help but feel for her. Tiana was once a talented academy student, but her fiancé accused her of cheating her way to the top. He couldn't accept that Tiana was smarter than him, and he tried to get rid of her. Heartbroken and alone, she set out on her own, determined to make a new life for herself. But things didn't go as planned. Tiana lost all her money gambling and was forced to find work. Then, she tried her hand at different jobs, but nothing seemed to work out. At that time, she was about to give up hope when fate intervened, leading her to Nick and his companions. On the other hand, Zem, the exiled priest, has his own tale of woe to share. He used to live in a city famous for its medicine and temples, and he was one of the priests there. One day, a girl named Muriel gave him a medicinal plant as a thank you gift, and Zem gave her some money in return. Then Muriel confessed her feelings to Zem that night, but he had to turn her down. As a priest, he wasn't allowed to date anyone. Hearing that, Muriel was heartbroken, and Zem still feels guilty for hurting her. The next day, Zem woke up finding himself surrounded by a group of stern-looking bodyguards. Standing before him was Muriel, dressed in clothing that left little to the imagination. She spun a tale about how Zem had forced her into prostitution, which resulted in him being thrown into jail. Then 3 long months went by before Zem was finally released from custody. However, his return to the city was not a warm one. Instead, he was met with harsh insults and venomous curses from the very people he once called friends. Feeling lost and alone, Zem turned to a woman who had been a close friend of Muriel's. She advised him to seek out his own path in life, but he had other ideas. Zem spent his days carousing with women, living a life of debauchery until his funds ran dry. Even when asked about a legendary dragon girl named Curran, he was so drunk that he could barely stand. Despite their different backgrounds, Zem and Curran had one thing in common, that they had both been betrayed by those closest to them. They found solace in each other's company and formed an unlikely partnership, setting out on a grand adventure together. The following day, they joined the Adventurers Guild and formed a new party called Survivors. They made 3 important rules: no interfering with each other's interests, no controlling each other's money, and no returning alive. They had all been betrayed before and were still wary of one another. Their adventure began in a labyrinth where they battled slimy monsters. During the fight, Tiana was attacked and fell to the ground. She immediately retaliated without checking her surroundings, almost hitting Curran, who was standing behind her. Luckily, Curran dodged the attack. However, Nick was still suspicious of Tiana. Then, at the top floor of the labyrinth, they encountered the boss slime. Soon after, Tiana impulsively attacked it without thinking, causing it to explode and cover their bodies in sticky goo. Meanwhile, Nick used this opportunity to open up to his party members. He showed them his equipment, abilities, and weaknesses. He was skilled in martial arts and dagger fighting, but had no magic, couldn't use heavy weapons, and couldn't heal himself. He realized that if they wanted to trust each other, they needed to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. Afterward, Zem joined the conversation by admitting his lack of skill in sword fighting, fist fighting, and magic. However, he possessed the unique ability to heal. Tiana, on the other hand, had a mastery of water, wind, and lightning magic, and could combine them to create powerful spells. Unfortunately, she was not adept at using fire magic or engaging in hand-to-hand combat. She also apologized to Curran for a previous incident. On the other hand, Curran, unlike Tiana, was skilled in using fire magic and melee combat. Then, they continued their journey by taking down the goblins in the forest. But soon Tiana discovered that they were facing an ogre, which was a more advanced form of the goblins. Despite the danger, they decided to confront the ogre, because leaving it unchecked would put the residents at risk. Shortly after, they formulated a plan in which Nick and Curran would lead the attack. Tiana would provide long-range support, and Zen would heal and offer support. The team sprang into action, and Curran put her faith in Tiana by turning her back to Tiana's spells. After a fierce battle, Curran finally emerged victorious over the ogre boss. However, as Nick attempted to retrieve the ogre's materials, he accidentally bumped into Curran and broke her pendant. Soon after, the scene shifted to Curran's past, when she received a pendant from her hero and mentor, Karios. Curran looked up to Karios and obeyed his every command. One day, Karios was planning to explore a labyrinth, and Curran was tasked with guarding his belongings. However, Karios changed his mind and told Curran to stay behind, claiming it would be too much trouble for her to join him. Despite feeling disappointed, Curran still followed her colleagues to the labyrinth, where she was relied upon for her abilities. During the mission, she was ordered to retrieve a snack from a pot alone, while her colleagues protected her. Although she trusted her colleagues, they vanished once Curran had successfully retrieved the snack, leaving her alone to face the poison of the pot snake. As it turned out, Karios knew that the snake would become weak after biting, and he used that moment to kill it. He then abandoned a helpless Curran to suffer the consequences of the snake's poison. Not long after, Curran woke up with a start, remembering that she had left the Dragon King's precious jewels at the inn. But when she arrived, she discovered that all her belongings, including the jewels, had been lost by Karios. Feeling defeated, Curran stumbled upon an adventurer called Phipps, known as the Solo Eater for his bravery in entering the labyrinth alone. There she began following him in secret, picking up some great food recommendations along the way. Despite her initial disappointment, Curran found solace in the delicious food she could now afford, and decided to make some money for herself. Meanwhile, Nick was also searching for the same pendant as Curran. Although she wasn't angry with him, he still felt terrible. Along the way, he met a Gate who he confided in about his troubles. After speaking with her, Nick finally met Curran, and their relationship improved. Soon after, the group received a mission to find the sacred sword bond. The following day, they headed to the labyrinth, which surprised them with its modern design. When they reached a large room with a sword's light shining in the center, they were struck by the sound and lights that flashed around them. As it turned out, the sword was the legendary bond sword they had been searching for. However, the sword would only lend its power to those who were honorable, respected justice and friendship. Then, when Nick lifted the sword, it triggered a guard system that activated when the sword was removed from its resting place. At that time, they were trapped and had to defeat a powerful guard named Golem. Golem was invulnerable to magic and physical attacks, but they had to escape. Soon after, Curran tried to attack, but Golem hit her, so Nick ordered them to retreat while he distracted Golem. Suddenly, the sword spoke, telling Nick to use it as a weapon and cry out Union. Soon after, he did as the sword instructed, but nothing happened, and he was thrown into the ruins. On the other hand, Tiana and Zem froze Golem to give Nick and Curran more time, but their magic only worked for a brief moment. At that moment, they were exhausted and gave up, accepting their fate. But out of nowhere, Nick's body transformed into a half-dragon form, and he defeated Golem by destroying its core. Suddenly, Nick and Curran's bodies returned to their original state, and they obtained the bond sword. Afterward, as they prepared to leave, the master gave Tiana a lighter as a parting gift. She had longed for one for quite some time. Before they said their goodbyes, the master imparted some wisdom to Tiana, encouraging her to discover who she truly was and what she was capable of. With those words ringing in her ears, she departed. Nick, on the other hand, had a different experience. He dreamt of being blackmailed by his girlfriend. When he awoke, he realized that the dream was actually telepathy from Kizuna. He was eager to learn everything about the survivors. The next day, they faced off against more monsters. At that time, Kizuna had joined their party, granting them all telepathy. Soon after, Curran charged towards a giant, but Kizuna leaped into action and engaged the enemy. Despite being physically outmatched, Kizuna's swordsmanship was impressive. He effortlessly dodged and deflected the giant's attacks, dazzling everyone with his skill. Finally, he managed to land the finishing blow, defeating the giant. However, Nick was left feeling drained and exhausted, despite not having participated in the battle. It was revealed that Kizuna had borrowed energy and mana from Nick's body to fuel his own attacks. Then, after completing their mission, Curran invited Nick and Kizuna to a nostalgic spot from Nick's past. Previously, Nick had a bad feeling about it, but followed his comrades anyways. To his dismay, he found his ex-girlfriend Claudine there, who was luring men in for money. She used the same lies and drama that Nick once fell for, but he wasn't about to let her con another victim. Then, he quickly exposed her deceit to the man she was targeting. Later, the group of survivors discussed their next mission when Claudine suddenly appeared with a fierce tiger named Leon. Nick knew Claudine was only using Leon for her own gain, but Leon surprised him by challenging him to a fight. Hearing that, Nick agreed, and they met at a nearby location. To Nick's surprise, Leon apologized for underestimating him, and even proposed a deal that he would trade Claudine, a known deceiver, for Nick's friends. He also accused Nick of using and betraying his friends to make money, but Nick refused to back down and fought with all his might. Soon after, a new group of survivors arrived with an elderly guild leader named Hilma. Hilma couldn't stop them without breaking the rules, and this sparked Leon to challenge Nick to a holy duel called the empty-handed calculation. Then she explained the game that it has 10 rounds of counting matches and simultaneous fistfights, with questions getting harder as the match progresses. After that, Nick and Curran were paired against Leon and Claudine respectively. However, the survivors suspected that Leon and Claudine would cheat with help from hidden telepathic gems. When the empty-handed calculation duel began, Curran rushed through the questions and lost several times, causing Nick to take heavy punches from Leon. At that time, Curran became anxious seeing Nick get beaten up, but Nick encouraged her to regain her focus. As the match progressed, Curran improved her calculations and began landing punches on Claudine, while Nick battled fiercely against Leon. Despite the odds, Nick refused to give up and fought until the end, proving his bravery and resilience. On the other side of things, Tiana had the daunting task of tracking down the cunning mastermind behind the enemy's fraudulent scheme. The rest of the team awaited her orders with bated breath. Unfortunately, Tiana couldn't find any evidence of magic use by the enemy, despite her tireless efforts. Finally, she devised a clever plan that she asked Ilma to engage the enemy in a direct battle and fire off a barrage of questions. This would hopefully lure the enemy out of hiding. At that time, Ilma was up for the challenge and provided Curran and Claudine with a plethora of questions to ask. It was a long shot, but Tiana's plan worked. Claudine was able to use a mind gem, a remote communication tool, to reveal the enemy's fraud. Then Tiana also gave her friends a code to exit the battle area. Meanwhile, Leon was dealing with his own troubles. He was a former high-class criminal, and now one of the Guardians was pressuring him for information about stolen goods from the Steel Group in the labyrinth. Suddenly, the Guardian's actions pushed Leon to the brink of desperation. Sadly, he couldn't handle the pressure and immediately went for a dangerous weapon called the Sword of Destruction. Back at the casino, Tiana was ready to take on other gamblers and win big, so she could continue her adventures. Turned out Nick was also there, accompanying Kizuna, who wanted to unwind after winning the Burnicle event. Little did they know that Leon had escaped from the Guardians and was on the hunt for survivors. He had a score to settle with Nick, and was determined to exact his revenge. At that time, Leon's senses were on high alert as he caught a whiff of survivors hiding in the casino. Without a second thought, he charged in and ruthlessly put an end to all the gambling. In his pursuit to find Tiana, he cunningly blocked the path of a witch to bait Nick into revealing himself. His plan worked, as Nick soon appeared wielding a dangerous Kizenokan. Meanwhile, Leon, who had been waiting for this moment, increased his power with the Horobinoken to take on his martial arts rival. Then, as Nick and Tiana joined forces in union mode, their icy powers clashed with Leon's fiery attacks. After a grueling battle, they managed to overpower him. At that time, Leon realized his mistakes and could only wallow in regret in a special cell prepared by the Guardians. Meanwhile, the story of Agate, formerly known as Belle Haggins, began as a humble bar singer. Her luck changed when Joseph Coleman, an idol promoter from Jeffrey Production, offered her a job. Then, she accepted the offer and became a beloved idol known as Agate, who played a significant role in Nick's life. Unfortunately, Belle Haggins, known as Agate, was thriving in life, but her romantic relationship with Donnie was anything but smooth. He often used her for gambling money. Thankfully, Belle Haggins decided to end things with him and move forward when she received hope from a divine entity formed by Nick and Tiana, joining forces to stop Leon. One night, Zem found himself in a tough spot when he encountered a boy about to be kidnapped. Despite still being in a relationship with a priest, Zem did everything in his power to protect the boy from a transparent kidnapper. With the help of Nick and Kizuna, they managed to drive away the kidnapper. However, this kidnapping incident led to another problem involving a small child being taken by a mysterious entity. Soon after, the survivors immediately went to the guild to get more information about the ongoing kidnapping case. Unfortunately, the bounty hunters there disapproved of their arrival, believing that their previous accomplishment in capturing Leon was not enough. Meanwhile, Tiana, feeling humiliated and ostracized, challenged the bounty hunters to witness the true strength of the survivors. Long story short, the survivors set out on a mission to capture a notorious fugitive named Hale, who was hiding out in a squalid area called Garbage Collection. As they made their move to apprehend him, they unexpectedly stumbled upon a former priest named Nalgarva, who was treating residents with a disease called syphilis, also known as the Yellow Devil. At that moment, the survivors found themselves in a tense confrontation with Nalgarva, but fortunately, it turned out to be a simple misunderstanding. They proved their worth as a fearless team that could catch a fugitive without any significant difficulties. However, things didn't go as smoothly as they hoped. They encountered some false information that hindered the Stepping Man kidnapping case investigation. Their assumptions were strengthened when they met a reporter named Olivia, who seemed to share similarities with the notorious Stepping Man in the Arbin legend. He was known to have a special connection with children. The survivors suspected that Olivia could be hiding something, especially when she refused to answer questions about her identity from Nick. Because of that, the survivors grew wary of Olivia after noticing some suspicious behavior. They decided to set a trap to catch the reporter who they suspected of being the Stepping Man, a character from a local legend who was known to be close to children. However, Olivia's actions seemed to support their suspicions, as she ignored Nick's attempts to uncover the reporter's identity. In an effort to catch the truth, the survivors devised a plan to catch the reporter in the act. So to catch the Stepping Man, the survivors sought help from adventurer Ada in Somalia. Soon after, she trained Nick in the use of magic, hoping to give him an advantage against the agile Stepping Man. Fortunately, their training paid off, and Nick and his team prevented a kidnapping. However, they were unable to catch the real culprit behind the Stepping Man persona. That Nick suspected that a magical item, the illusionary King Jewel, was helping the kidnapper hide his true identity. To confirm his theory, Nick sought out Leon and shared his suspicions. Together, they uncovered the truth behind the Stepping Man and his magic item, allowing the survivors to finally bring the kidnapper to justice. Soon after, once the survivors received information about the Stepping Man, Nick, and the group sprang into action. They searched for clues to figure out how the kidnapper had been operating, which led them to the slums known as Garbage Collection. There, they met Olivia, who shared their goal of identifying the real culprit behind the kidnappings, especially the one involving a young child known as Arbin Legend Stepping Man. After clearing up any misunderstandings, the two groups worked together to search Garbage Collection. They had some success, discovering a piece of a valuable jewel in the body of a jaundiced child. This led them to a former priest named Nalgarva, who was an expert at garbage collection and became the main suspect in the Stepping Man case. Eventually, they confronted the Stepping Man, who turned out to be Nalgarva seeking revenge for his daughter's death, which society had ignored. At that time, Zem noticed that Nalgarva was turning away from God and tried to guide him back, but his attempts were interrupted by the sudden arrival of Shirokamet, a follower of a demonic deity. Soon after, chaos erupted as Shirokamet attacked the survivors of the Stepping Man incident. Just when things seemed hopeless, Olivia arrived and bravely joined the fight to protect the survivors. The reporter created an opportunity for Nick and Zem to work together, and they united their efforts to stop the demon worshipper. As the battle intensified, the cultist used an explosion as a diversion and managed to escape. Despite their efforts, Nick and Zem were unable to prevent the escape. Then, the survivors of a terrible explosion mourned the loss of their friend Nalgarva, who they were unable to save from the rubble. In their sorrow, they discovered that one of their own, Olivia, was a holy artifact like their friend Kizuna, who went by the name Brave Sword. As time passed, the survivors found themselves in a deep depression after witnessing the Stepping Man incident. Meanwhile, Nick, who admired Argus, felt empty and unmotivated. Then, Zem carried the burden of Nalgarva's duty as a Messiah in the garbage collection, while Tiana could only think of her party ties. On the other hand, Curran was filled with anger, remembering Cario's betrayal when he stole the Dragon King's gems. However, their worries began to fade when Kizuna and Olivia showed a cheerful attitude and motivated them not to give up. With renewed determination, Nick, Zem, Tiana, and Curran made a promise to face all evil bravely and always survive even in difficult circumstances. The survivors were inspired by their friends' bravery and were ready to confront any challenge together. The anime ends. The moral lesson of this story is never trust a giant who can't dance, but always trust your half-dragon form to save the day.